Welcome to the Bluegrass Podcast. Today we're talking with C.J. Carter, State Director of the Kentucky Chapter of Minorities for Medical Cannabis, owner of Cannamercial Realty Group, and a member of the Kentucky Hemp Association's Board of Directors. We're talking cannabis in Kentucky, recent progress on Senate Bill 47, CJ's journey as a medical patient, social equity programs, and more. Let's get started.
So, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your own personal journey with cannabis? I think that you have a special connection to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ironically, just a quick story. My first time smoking cannabis was at my eighth grade graduation party. It was a going away party for me and also a graduation party. Actually, lived in Frankfort, Kentucky at the time. But yeah, fast forward to 2015 was when I was first introduced to the cannabis space through my brother who had started the Comfy Tree Academy, which was a licensing boot camp that traveled across the country, helping individuals enter the cannabis space. Through that time, of course, I was married, but my ex-wife hated the fact that I smoked. So it was 2 weeks prior to Father's Day weekend, summer of 2018. I had quit smoking cold turkey. And we were on vacation at Great Wolf Lodge in Cincinnati. And I just remember it was like 6 a.m. I remember waking up with like 3 guys in my face. And I didn't know what was going on. I was really like discombobulated. So I started fighting with these guys because I thought somebody had broken into our hotel room. And it was finally when my ex-wife, she let me know that I had a seizure. It was the first seizure of my life. As I said, ironically, after I quit smoking cold turkey. Then a couple of weeks after that, I had another seizure, then another seizure, then another seizure. And then after the 5th seizure is when they diagnosed me with temporal lobe epilepsy. So the temporal lobe of my brain, it controls your memory and your speech. So my memory's not the best, and sometimes my speech becomes a little slurred, or I lose train of thought, like mid-sentence sometimes. But yeah, that diagnosis of epilepsy kind of changed everything for me in terms of my cannabis journey, because it was just a business at first. But then once I was diagnosed, I found out that this is really my medicine. After the MRI that I had later that year in 2018, they found that I had a cavernoma behind my left eye, which looks like a cave on the MRI. So it's like a dark spot in my brain where they think that the seizures actually originate from. So I still have to get an MRI. The next one that I have scheduled, they want to monitor to see if it's grown at all, the cavernoma, and if it has, they're going to want to do brain surgery, which is something I'm very, very apprehensive about. So in the cannabis right now, this is it's a very brand new industry. It's a brand new marketplace that's about to open. So with my diagnosis, in the cannabis space, where I am an advocate and a patient, I've established a few business fronts as well in terms of, offering myself and my family. I have 2 boys from my marriage. I have a 7 and a 3-year-old. And unfortunately, since I have a pre-existing condition, I'm unable to get any more life insurance. So I view, my journey in the cannabis space as a means of me providing for my 2 boys, through my entrepreneurial pursuits. So, life insurance isn't a route for me, but succeeding in the cannabis space, is. It's something, that I'm very determined in doing, is, succeeding in the ventures that I have set up. So currently that's where I am in my cannabis journey. It's been a long one, I guess, since my 8th grade graduation party to where I am today.
Absolutely. And this might be a little too personal, and let me know if it is, but do you think that using cannabis before you got your diagnosis maybe pushed off having a seizure or showing symptoms of what was already developing?
Well, I'm not a doctor or anything, but I said this to my doctor, based off of the size of the cavernome in my brain, it's not small. And it's been there for a while based off of the size of it. And I played sports growing up. I played football. I was really good at football and had quite a few concussions and head injuries. Um, but it does seem as if I was medicating myself, from my personal experience and the firsthand knowledge that I do have. Smoking majority of my life, and then all of a sudden when I stop, then the seizures emerge, from this spot in my brain that's been there for quite some time. So that's the one thing, the unfortunate thing about epilepsy, especially epilepsy with Black men. Like, there is currently no research whatsoever. I've tried to search for clinical research associated with, individuals who have epilepsy. And when it comes to men, there's hardly any. And when it comes to Black men, there's none. So, that's my own case study. From my perspective, it does seem as if I was medicating myself, throughout my life up until the point where I quit cold turkey. And then that's when these setbacks started to happen.
And if you want to talk about your own projects a little bit, I believe that one of those involves real estate and locations for cannabis.
Yes, yes. So, being that I've been in the cannabis space for several years now, um, it's very apparent that one of the most important entry points into the cannabis space is having properly zoned real estate. So that's a huge void that needs to be filled within the cannabis space, and that's one thing that I tell a lot of people who have questions and who want me to consult them, on their cannabis businesses, is that the cannabis space is filled with voids, and if you have an idea or an entrepreneurial pursuit, you can actually fill those voids. Being that this is a industry that's in its infancy. So I identified that void. Being that Kentucky, we're about to be a brand new market. So we haven't quite opened yet, but it's not a matter of if, it's when. So I've established myself as an industry professional when it comes to real estate. And my job is to, assist individuals and businesses, through the leasing, the management, and the sales of property. So I advise, clients, on their best courses of action when deciding on how to invest or how to improve real property, of a commercial asset. And that's where I've built and I've established the Cannamercial Realty Group, which, as I said, it encompasses all aspects of sales, leasing, investment in the improvement of retail property, investment property, farmland, businesses, industries, medical facilities, and a dozen other property types. So it's the business where I see that's something that's going to be really needed, in terms of providing that substantial analytical data, along with financial information and market demographics that are really going to determine the type of marketplace that we have here in Kentucky. It's something that it has offered me a lot of teachable moments in learning the real nuances of the cannabis industry, as it relates to real estate. Because outside of real estate, another important thing, of course, is capital. But capital goes, right in hand with the real estate, because it's kind of all inclusive when you're trying to establish, say, a dispensary, a cultivation facility, or manufacturing, testing, whatever the case may be. I've placed myself in a position to work directly with, industry leaders, with community leaders, government officials, lawyers, zoning boards, who else? Accountants, mortgage companies, banks, title companies, appraisers. This is uncharted territory as it relates to real estate. It's something that, as I said, I'm creating this, from the rubble, or so to speak, or from a bare landscape. Building something that I see is going to be viable. It's going to allow me to be sustainable in the cannabis space. That's one of the things that often happens, when people have a entrepreneurial pursuit and they enter, a cannabis space or enter the cannabis space. It's very difficult in trying to, find success because there are so many deterrents and there's so many undeterminable factors that occur in the cannabis space, being, that is still federally illegal. And here in the state of Kentucky, being that we haven't even legalized yet. So just like in any other business venture, one of the most important things is position. It's just like the game of chess. It's all in how you position yourself.
And like you're talking about with different challenges, especially with cannabis, there really is a demand for people who can give good advice, even with things like retail space, understanding how close you can be to other businesses, schools, residential areas. No, there's definitely a demand. Do you have
Oh,
any area that you enjoy more than the others, like farms or maybe dispensaries or law offices or anything that you've just found you gravitate more towards?
well, pretty much anything dealing with real estate, has, been somewhere that I have an interest in, whether that is farmland, and talking to farmers who have vacant land, or whether it's visiting, industrial parks in different cities here in the state, mainly here in Louisville and in Lexington, old industrial, warehouses that have been sitting vacant and have been on the market for, thousands of days. There are quite a few properties, listed on the MLS services that have been, on the market for quite some time, where these property owners or land owners or whatever the case may be, they're unable to move. And, that's where, I come in. But I would say like retail space seems like that's the most or has the highest supply of vacant retail space. That's where you'll see a lot of openings as it comes to when it comes to commercial real estate, and that's the one part of the supply chain that everybody's familiar with. And me coming in contact with people, that's one of the things that they always talk about is, I want to be a dispensary owner, or I want to own a dispensary. What people don't realize is, that space in the supply chain is going to be one of the most competitive, because everybody wants to have a dispensary. Everybody wants to, have that retail location that's, looks like an Apple store, but they disperse weed or they
Hmm.
sell cannabis. But definitely on the retail spot of the supply chain, pretty much anywhere in the supply chain, is an interest to me, because at the end of the day, I view myself as a real estate consultant. A cannabis real estate consultant, where I am assisting, sellers, buyers, landlords, and tenants, in the cannabis space. As I said earlier, it's very young, it's very in flux, and it's inherently risky. It being in this business, it's all about doing the legwork, and getting the proper deal completed. And it's my goal to be able to maximize the value of a property, and then also reduce the amount of time wasted in obtaining an offer and an acceptance. In a new lane, which is cannabis real estate. I believe I'm one of the only agents in the state who has or who considers this to be their niche. Like, this is my niche in real estate, in commercial real estate, is to, as I said, assist anyone who's interested in entering the space, and filling, what it is that they see as in terms of their vision of being involved in the cannabis space. I see myself as being an assistant to helping people's cannabis dreams come true.
And how do you see things changing? Because, like we're talking about with real estate right now, especially in Kentucky, there are certain regulations and certain standards that you have to have because a lot of people are entering just with CBD. How do you see things changing as Kentucky gets into the more regulated cannabis space, possibly, or like with other states, when things get more restrictive on the types of property you have to have?
Being that Kentucky is about to be a new market, there is going to be somewhat of a premium, or what they call the green tax, associated with real estate properties. Um, oftentimes how it happens is when people hear the word cannabis, they automatically um, add a tax to it, being that they know this is something, where a property owner or a landowner can possibly, raise their rents or raise the actual price. That's something that's definitely going to happen. So what tends to happen is once markets um, tend to stabilize or who've had legalization for quite some time, that green tax often diminishes. Because the supply and demand actually change. So that's one of the things about Kentucky is, as it stands right now, there is a supply, but it's few and far between in terms of the properties actually being zoned correctly, based on how it's written in current legislation. Um, but that is going to change once the demand increases, and that's where we're going to see that price increase as it comes more and more. Once we reach legalization and once we reach maturity in the space, it's going to be those extreme highs and those extreme lows that you see in any marketplace when it first opens up. Another thing that I can see changing is traditional lending practices. Currently, as it stands, like in other states, financial institutions tend to not lend to cannabis businesses, being that there's still prohibition. It's still federally illegal, so that leaves cannabis businesses, in a tough spot, because it is an all cash business at this time. And then also, when it comes to the real estate tax code, that the 280E, it's a federal or tax code that prevents plant touching businesses from deducting standard business expenses, and it's something that hinders the cannabis space, right now as we speak. So there's a lot of factors that go into what's going to happen and what's going to change here in Kentucky, because the legislator is inefficient. I'll say it in the nicest way that I can.
To say the least.
Right. These guys, a lot of them claim to have never touched the plant or have never smoked the plant. And then that's where I come in and say, well, if you guys have no experience with the plant, how do you expect to set up a marketplace? Or how do you expect to set up a cannabis industry here in the state of Kentucky that's gonna thrive and that's gonna stand the test of time? My answer to that question is that they don't. I mean, they honestly do not know what they're doing, and it's as clear as day that they don't, because they go around asking these questions that have nothing to do with the actual bottom line, where it puts the state and the residents of this commonwealth in a tough position, because once cannabis does become legal, there are so many benefits that are going to be associated with opening up the market for this plant that comes from Mother Earth, that comes from a seed. It'll be able to provide us with so many fruits here in the state, where the legislators, it's just like it's all lost in translation. They don't hear the 90% of Kentuckians who support cannabis. It's like, you guys are supposed to be working for the constituents, but it's clear that you're not, because a lot of the legislators, they're working off of their interest and special interest that back a lot of them, when it comes to politics being ran by money. And those monies and those profits are often over people, unfortunately.
I absolutely love that you're talking about how legislators are trying to regulate, but they say that they have no experience with the plant whatsoever. I think about that constantly because, like yourself, with someone with cannabis experience, it changes the way that you look at the industry and you look at the way that things need to be regulated. Experience just changes how you understand it.
Exactly. And we were supposed to have that hearing today. I'm upset that we didn't have it either. I know I had plans on testifying if they had the sign up sheet available. I was definitely going to share a few words with the Senate, licensing and occupation committee, because that's one of the things that the legislators, they always talk about is economic growth and workforce development. Where here we are, at the precipice of the opening of a multi-billion-dollar industry in the
Mm-hmm.
best world to cultivate and harvest and manufacture cannabis. This is, I call Kentucky the Fertile Crescent of cannabis. This is the best place in the world for cannabis to be grown. And it's like we have this unique opportunity here in Kentucky, and the legislators are literally dropping the ball. Even though we're one of the last states to legalize, like really, I can still see the benefit, in this situation, being that we can see, the failures of other states on where they have failed in terms of their legalization. We should be using, what other states have failed at to create our blueprint here in the state of Kentucky. And it is, as I said, a unique opportunity that the legislators are dropping the ball on. I mean, we could be at the forefront, of this multi-billion-dollar industry, but yet we're still lagging behind because of the inefficiencies and the inadequacies, of our legislators, who I don't know what they're actually thinking. Um, I sense a lot of them in my dealings and in my talkings, with the legislators that I have relationships with, and the ones that I don't. It seems that the ones who don't are often basing everything off of what they believe, and what they feel, rather than basing things off what they know. Because I come from the train of thought, when you believe, you don't know. So you have to know in order to do more than just believe, and then you have to apply what you know. Then that then becomes wisdom, and that's kind of what I see is missing in politics. Is there's things are based on how things make people feel, or based off of what people believe, which could be false. It could be the furthest from the truth that it is, but since you believe in it, and it sets up a comfort zone for you, that often happens, especially here in the cannabis space, at the detriment, of patients, of citizens, of individuals who are looking, for work, or who are looking to start businesses. It's hurting all parties involved, due to the legislator and their inability to actually, push this measure through, in terms of legalizing medical marijuana, in terms of legalizing recreational marijuana, in terms of, setting up a stronger foundation for hemp, in terms of us actually setting up a cannabis commission, where the actual cannabis plant can be housed, in one department under, say, the Department of Agriculture. All of the things that I'm saying, it makes the most sense. But as I said earlier, when dealing with politics and politicians, logic is non-existent, unfortunately.
I love everything you're talking about. So my next question is, when are you running? Because this is the sort of voice that we need for cannabis in the legislature.
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because a lot of people, ask me that question. And point blank, period. I'm a Black man in America. Politics has never done anything for me, so I've been disassociated from politics for a majority of my life. But I once read a quote, was years ago, that said, "Even though you don't have an interest in politics, doesn't mean that politics has an interest in you." And it definitely seems that politics has an interest in me, but at this stage of my life, I don't see myself being involved in politics, except for the avenue that I have now, in terms of advocating for the plant. Politics. It's a lot. It takes a lot, and I can see what politicians go through, and the frustrations associated with politics. But at this stage of my life, it's something that I can't see happening. I have a 7 and a 3-year-old, so that's one of my main focuses right now, is being the best father and being the best dad that I can possibly be to my 2 boys. So I can't have something, come in between me and my 2 sons, at this stage of my life, just because, that's something that's so valuable to me. It's something that I can't squander. I can't give up that value right now. But that's not to say that I wouldn't run for politics. But yeah, just at this stage of my life, I'm coming from a point, I'm recently divorced. So in my divorce, being, that I have two boys, I gave up everything for my sons. I lost a substantial amount of money in my divorce, where, it put me below the negative. So, that's where my real focus is right now, on my two boys and on building, myself up, and reestablishing my legacy. Because, I'm coming from a deficit right now, and, getting involved with politics, that's going to put a lot more on my plate as of now. But, I don't mind, being a consultant to people. When people have questions, by all means, I'll answer those questions, to the best of my ability. And then the knowledge that, I've obtained over the years, in the cannabis space. But I won't say I'm not going to run for politics. I just prefer being a consultant right now.
I completely understand that. I'll say the more you talk, though, the more I want you to run. But you're not completely separated from politics either. You're director of the Kentucky Chapter of Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and you're also a board director for the Kentucky Hemp Association, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So, those are our pursuits, being involved in the nonprofit space, where, cannabis is a passion of mine. And, I don't mind, giving back to cannabis. And, I do that by serving as the state director for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and also by being on the board of directors for the Kentucky Hemp Association. I have a vision for Kentucky, when it comes to cannabis. And much like software is to California, I can see cannabis being that for Kentucky. I can see us being, the epicenter of a international marketplace, when it comes to cannabis. Everybody has their eyes on Kentucky to see what it is that we're going to do here in the state. I had a call a couple of weeks ago from an international company in the Netherlands who is supplying medical grade cannabis to the European Union right now for medicinal purposes. And here the FDA just recently, opened up or gave out some guidelines for clinical research. So they've actually reached out to me, this company overseas, and was asking questions, about Kentucky. It's like, what's the forecast? What's it look like? How do you see, Kentucky, when do you see Kentucky coming on board for medical marijuana? Because they're actually thinking about coming here and setting up shop here in Kentucky. So, there's a lot that goes into all of this. But me being, in those positions, in the nonprofit realm, that's my way of actually giving back. I like to pay things forward, and this isn't a individual pursuit for me. I am a very selfless person. I view myself as a catalyst, or I view myself as the spark, that's going to set a raging inferno that's going to change the landscape of Kentucky when it comes to cannabis. So any way that I can give back, that's what I'm doing. I'm a person who likes to, stay behind the scenes. I've been doing this work for 3 years now, and a lot of people still don't know what it is that I do. And, I like it that way sometimes, just to not be in the limelight. I like to be in the background, trying to help out as many people as I can to push them into the limelight. Because, the cannabis space, it's showing, that it's an amazing industry to be a part of. And there are more people who are starting to dial in and who are wanting to learn more and to become more involved in the cannabis space. And, any way that I can do that, I definitely am. Just trying to, help as many people as possible to be, multi-billion dollars. It's a lot, and it is what you is if you want to.
And for those of my listeners that may not be familiar with both of those groups, do you want to talk a little bit about what they represent and what they work towards?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. Unfortunate. It is what it is, and it's crazy. It definitely is, and it's a lot. It definitely is a lot when it comes to, cannabis. It's going to help and it's going to hurt. It's going to be what you want to be. It is what it is. If you want to be a part of this, then you have to do it. You have to give up whatever it is that's going to cause you to come back. So you have to do it. You have to have that strength. You have to have, six, or you have to have steps, to actually get figures. It's a lot, but a lot of people don't know what it actually is and don't know where to go, in terms of actually being where we need this cannabis. It could be anywhere here in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky is the bluegrass state. The bluegrass, it says it right there.
Hmm.
It's that simple. We have the grass, here in Kentucky. We have the best location, being where we're located. We have the best weather. We have the best soil. Everything is just set up perfectly for us here in Kentucky. But it seems as if, some of us, specifically the legislators, dropping the ball. We are falling behind, in terms of establishing this new marketplace, that is cannabis. Uh, we have everything here in Kentucky. We have the best location. We have a fresh water source. Uh, we have everything that you can imagine. We have the limestone in our soil, that enriches everything with magnesium and calcium. We have everything. And yet, here we are still with no legal legislation, as it relates to medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. It's sad. It's exhausting. It's it still is understandable, because at the end of the day, it's all about money. And I can see legislators, putting themselves in a position to try and capitalize the most, off of the money. I recently, learned not too long ago that, Senator Stivers in his district, I believe there's a letter of intent for a processing facility, in his district. I don't know if a lot of people know that or not, but I read this not too long ago about that letter of intent being, in his district. And Senator Stivers, he doesn't like me. I know that for a fact. It was a couple of weeks ago. I was in Leadership Louisville, the Ignite program, it was the spring of 2021. Well, Leadership Louisville was actually, in Frankfurt a couple of weeks ago while I was there doing some lobby work. And I saw a few of the individuals who were involved. And they were like, "Yeah, we're here. You should come by, and we're having a little talk. You should come by. We're in this room." So, I finished my lobby work and I end up going into the room where they are. And it's packed. It's about 50 or 60 people. And they have a few legislators in there giving a talk, answering some questions. And then shortly after I arrive, behind me arrives Senator Stivers. So he starts talking, and then he opens it up for questions. So my hand shoots up. And instead of giving him the softball questions, I challenged him. I asked him a question about social equity and social economics, associated with the history, of Kentucky, being that there's no other state, in the country that has the history and that has the storyline that Kentucky has, as it relates to cannabis. And I put him on the spot, and he turned cherry red. I'm talking about he was extremely red. And he did not answer my question about social equity or social economics. He George Bush me, basically. He ran around the actual topic, but that's what I'm in the business of, is trying to challenge these legislators as much as possible. Um, a lot of people, don't realize it, but when you, testify, or you give testimony, or you take a stance, the root word of testimony and testifying is testicles. So you would have to put your testicles online when you speak, when you talk, when you give testimony. So that has to be put on the line to make sure that you are telling the truth. Because if you're not, then you're risking your manhood. And unfortunately, a lot of politicians, they don't have that viewpoint. They will, say one thing behind closed doors, and then, When it comes to the public, it's something that's totally different. And I've been trying my best over the last 3 years to try and get a meeting with Senator Stivers, Senator Thayer, who else was it? Senator Mike Wilson. But it's always the same response. Oh, the calendar's full. We don't have any space for you. And it's just like, I think that's because I'm the black guy who's the cannabis advocate, who's going to challenge you guys' thinking and is going to make you uncomfortable. But that's what we have to do, because nothing happens and there's no growth that's associated with comfort zones. You got to step outside of those comfort zones and where you're comfortable to actually, achieve, your true height. To achieve, your greatest accomplishments, you have to step outside of that comfort zone. And that's why I try and preach to these legislators that we can't keep doing things the way we've been doing them, because the way things have been done is it's been failing the people of this Commonwealth. That's a crazy statement, when you talk about the Commonwealth of Kentucky, because it seems like that wealth, it is not common. And in particular, here's a brand new industry, where the wealth can be common. But for some reason, the way things are trending, it's going to be business as usual, where that wealth is only relegated to a few individuals, unfortunately. But in the business of trying to change that, appreciate you and your podcast, on being able to highlight, a lot of these issues in this topic, around cannabis, because this is something that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people are still believing in belief, and they don't know what actually is at hand and what's ahead of us and what the actual possibilities are, for a legal cannabis marketplace. Like, there is so much potential, that we have literally in the palm of our hand. So it seems as if it's up to the people. It's up to the citizens of the state. It's up to us residents to actually, call and start to harass these legislators and let them know, there's no more straddling the fence. You can't straddle the fence no more. You're either for it or you're against it. If you're against it, great. If you're for it, we want to know why. So, that's why, I got to give a huge salute to Matthew and Lauren with Kentucky Normal, Patrick and Jen with the Kentucky Cannabis Freedom Coalition, Kristen and Julie with Kentucky Moms, with medical marijuana. You have Kongu with the ACLU. Who else? We have Raul with the NAACP, and there's so many other organizations out there, where we are in a place where we have formed a coalition to try and bring all of this stuff to the forefront, where we're able to establish a foundation for this actual marketplace. And, that's why we all encourage people to start contacting their legislators, because, enough is enough. We are at a point, in time where talk is cheap, and it's always been cheap. And it seems like that's all politicians have been doing, is talking, and there is no action. So, that's what we implore people to do, is start to call your legislators, start to put their feet to the fire, so we can get this ball moving. We've made a lot of headway. We thought we made a huge stride today by having a Senate committee hearing. Got my hopes up this whole weekend. I'm super excited. It's like, yes, we've made it this far in the Senate. It's never been here before. This is the first, but yet it wasn't on the agenda yesterday. So it's just like, dang, another setback. But we're still here. We're still standing. We're still fighting. And I just want to keep saying it, encouraging people, please contact your legislators. Look it up on the internet. It's a quick Google search for you to find out who your legislator is. It's not too hard. There's numbers out there that you can call, to get the legislators on the phone. It's just a matter of how much are we willing to put forward to move this issue further, and then put it in a place where we can begin to build this industry based off of our specifications, because the legislators don't know. They don't know what they're doing, but there are individuals who know exactly what's needed and who know exactly what needs to be avoided, in terms of setting up this cannabis marketplace in the breadbasket of cannabis, which is the bluegrass state of Kentucky. And, that pun kind of is intended. being that, you have the Bluegrass podcast and here we are in the Bluegrass state, it kind of is coming full circle.
Absolutely. I tell people, I'm like, we're going to put the grass back in the bluegrass. It's going to happen. And
just as free as a butterfly. I wanna breathe clean air from the open sky, and I wanna know what it's like to get stuck in the cold, and I wanna get chills in my bones when I smoke a cigarette. I've got a place that I can call home, and I've got places that I wanna go, and I've got things to the world I wanna show. Can't you tell? I'm just excited now. I'm just excited to grow. I've tried some drugs, yeah, and I love to talk too. Oh, how the music it seems to soothe my blues. I believe in love and I believe in you, and I know we're tired of paying these dues, and we're all looking for a little good news. I've got the fire if you wanna let loose. Said I've got the fire. Tell me, do you have the juice? I've got a place that I can call home, and I've got places that I wanna go, and I've got things to the world I wanna show. Can't you tell? I'm just excited now. I'm just excited to grow.
And
That
I'm
is
glad you're talking about so many groups that are activating and that there are avenues for people to get involved, because sometimes I think people can slow down or get a little depressed about what might happen. But I like that you're talking about pushing for the things that we want to happen.
right,
And
right.
talking about those social equity programs, I would love to get your thoughts on the way that we need not just to frame that, but the actual things we need to do. Because I think that one of the failures of some of the other states has been that the aid or the help or whatever these programs are supposed to be don't actually make it to the people that need it, or don't actually end up going to businesses that do
Mhm.
support minorities in different ways.
When it comes to social equity and social economics, there's a lot of talk. There's a whole lot of talk. I know there are a few states, namely Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, California, Washington, who all have social equity provisions written into their legislation. But even though it's written into the legislation, it oftentimes it doesn't come to fruition due to people's lack of commitment, in the high places that are in a position to actually see these measures actually go through. So, going back to what I stated earlier about the history of Kentucky as it relates to cannabis, um, Kentucky once upon a time was the largest producer of hemp and illegal marijuana through the 1800s, early 1900s. Kentucky produced, I believe it was 90% of the nation's hemp supply. A lot of that hemp through that time, along with slavery, the hemp was used to make the bags that housed, the cotton or the ropes that tied down the tobacco. This was all done here in Kentucky. And even though Kentucky was not a plantation state, there were slaves here in the numbers, over hundreds of thousands of slaves. And when it comes to hemp, they actually referred to hemp, or hemp was referred to here in Kentucky as the nigger crop. That's what they called it because it was done on the back of the black man and the black family. Where hemp was dirty, it was very laborious. It took a lot for it to be, processed into the various means in which it could be processed into, and that was all done by the black man here in the state and the black family here in the state. So when it comes to social equity, there is no other story that has this gravity associated with it. When it comes to Black folks. And I like to use Black folks specifically because this is our story here in the state of Kentucky. No one else has this story. Even though, we use the term minority, um, when it comes to legislation, when it comes to legalese, that term minority it's very broad and it's very ambiguous. That's how things operate in legalese. But more specifically, when it comes to Black folks, nobody else has this story. And that's what it is that I'm advocating for when it comes to social equity, is ensuring that, a certain percentage of the actual applications are actually allocated for Black people, specifically for Black folks here in the state of Kentucky, because a lot of the people who live here in Kentucky were born and raised here. Their parents were born and raised here. Their grandparents were born and raised here. So there are a lot of direct ties associated back to 1850 with Black folks who have direct ties to that family lineage that actually grew the 90% of hemp that was grown here in Kentucky. So I would like to see a certain allocation of the total licenses, whether that be for dispensary or retail, for processing, for cultivation, for testing, for delivery, how they currently have it, how they currently have it written. So that entire supply chain, I want a certain percentage of those applications to be allocated for Black folks. And then on top of that, there needs to be a subsidies that's associated with those applications that have been allocated to Black folks, because that's, as I said, one of the major barriers of entry into the cannabis space is capital. And Black folks and minorities, we don't have access to that type of capital. A lot of people don't realize is when you set up a dispensary or a retail location, it typically costs anywhere from 1.5 to $3 million to actually set up, get your license, get your real estate, get all the things that you need, retrofit through construction, your building. That's a lot of money. And then on top of that, you won't see a return on your investment until around, 3 to 5 years when you start to really see that money coming back in. So those subsidies associated with the percentage of applications is something that I'm fighting for in terms of social economics here in the state of Kentucky. Because as I always say, a fraction of a percentage of multi-billions is multi-millions. And that right there is generational wealth. And that can change generations of Black folks who have been indiscriminately punished by the war on drugs here in the state of Kentucky, where there's only about 300 and I think around 320,000 Black folks in the state of Kentucky, but specifically here in Louisville, we're 10 times more likely to be arrested and charged with a cannabis crime. Like, how is that actually possible? 10 times more likely when there's only 320,000 of us. We make up less than 15%, of the state's population. Like, how is that actually possible? But we know how it's possible because criminal justice associated with cannabis was built against our best interest. It was built to, place us in a position where we can't prosper. And, that's what social equity is there for. It's there to change that narrative, to author a new storyline for people who look like me, for, Black folks, for melanated people who have a direct connection to the history of Kentucky as it relates to cannabis. It's of the utmost importance in my eyes that we are written into this legislation, because one thing that I've learned in politics is nothing happens retroactively. If you don't have a seat at the table when plans are being solidified for legalization, they're going to forget about you. And once they forget about you, they don't go back and rewrite legislation to consider you. That's the nature of the beast. That's how politics are currently set up. So that's why I've been fighting this fight for the last 3 years, through Minorities for Medical Marijuana, specifically for Black folks here in the state of Kentucky. Because as I said, we are in a unique place here in Kentucky with the history that we have here. A lot of people don't know it. When I travel and go to the various conferences and tell people about the history of Kentucky, nobody knows it. This is like something that's brand new to people. It's like, are you serious? That can't be, but it is. It is be. It's the actual truth, and that's why it's of the utmost importance that social equity, in my eyes, is included in all current and future cannabis legislation.
This is something I'd like to get your thoughts on. It doesn't fall under the traditional social equity we've seen in other states, but the idea of limiting the amount of licenses and cutting out small producers, because like you said, it can be incredibly difficult to raise $1, $2, $3 million in capital. But if you have maybe an acre direct to consumer and you open up the licenses, you provide the most value for communities and the most value to the business as well. Like,
Right.
Not just saying you get 2 out of the 15, but saying that anyone should be able to make a profit and a living off of this without having to go to someone else for permission. In addition to, like you said, direct help, direct grants, help people with real money.
Yeah, that's kind of was the Oklahoma model, where any and everyone could apply and there wasn't a cap on the actual licenses. Currently, as it's written in the legislation, they kind of use that same language where they use the term "at least." So they have it written in the legislation where there's going to be at least 25 dispensaries. There's going to be at least 15 cultivation facilities. There's going to be at least 5 processing facilities. So they do have that currently written into the legislation where there necessarily isn't a cap. But then, that happens, with small time business, with the small people who aren't these huge, multi-state operators that have, facilities in several states. We still are, taking a back seat, even though we haven't even legalized yet, due to the fact that how capital intensive this space is. It's a lot that goes into this whole entire thing. It's somewhat of a quagmire, at this stage of the game, because there are so many unknowns that are associated with it, and it's easy to write legislation, but it's very difficult to implement that legislation. So even if we get social equity written into the legislation, it's going to be difficult to actually get it implemented. Especially, with the wishes that I have, that are associated with subsidies associated with that. I know I'm asking for a lot, but you have to ask for the moon. And, I expect it, but I know that it's probably not going to happen, but I'm still going to ask for more than what is actually, possible for actually happening, even though, you got to be a realist in this situation. But when it comes to the licenses, they do have it written that you have to be a resident of the state for, I believe it's 3 years. So that is kind of, insulating, our marketplace by making sure that, individuals are residents of the state. But even adding home grows, which, as you said, having, direct to consumer. If you're able to, grow your own, or if you're able to have an acre of land that you grow, specific seeds, or you grow the root, whatever the case may be, that is something that's not talked about. I mean, as of yet, it hasn't been talked about, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to come up in future conversations. But there still is a lot of growth that can happen in terms of the legislation that they currently have, and that was in the Senate Licensing and Occupations Committee. Even though, the Republicans pound on their chests as it's being the most restrictive legislation in the country, we can definitely move from that restriction and move towards, more prosperity in the cannabis space if the legislators simply broaden their outlook.
Absolutely. And I think going back to those like small farms and direct to consumer, it also allows people that entry point, right? For the cost of making sure that your soil's okay and the cost of a few seeds, it allows you to get up and going, creates the greatest amount of value so people are getting the most money. And it also means it's going to be cheapest for your community. So the people who really need that help are also going to be able to benefit as well.
What you're talking about, it seems as if it's common sense. I'm right there with you. That is, that's it right there. What you just described, like, that is so streamlined that, helps out all parties involved. But for some odd reason, if we were to give that proposal to the legislator, they're going to muddy it. They're going to find something wrong with it, and they're going to try and change it, even though, what you just explained, I mean, that is an amazing business model for a community, for a small community to even have that business model, because that's going to help all of the residents of that community, but I'm trying my best, being that I've been in this for 3 years, man, try my best not to get frustrated. Try not to get angry, because it seems like for the last, what's about to be 4 years, it's 3.5 years. It'll be 4 years in September, man. It seems like we just been treading water. Just been in the same place and haven't made much progress. But that's what it is. When it comes to politics, we try and present all of these ideas to these legislators, but yet it always seems to fall on deaf ears, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that we give up. I mean, because that's not what we do. We're in this business to fight. We're in this business to see real results. And we're here to see people prosper, not only corporations and businesses, but we want to see the people of Kentucky prosper as well, because there certainly is that potential that's associated with us in terms of the ideas that we have, in terms of implementing those ideas into the marketplace here in Kentucky. But just got to keep up the good fight, man. Just got to keep trugging along, and tell people to throw me another life preserver, even though I've been treading water. We've been treading water in the same spot, on the deep end, trying to get ourselves out of it.
Oh yeah. Well, like you said, get angry, but then activate, right? Turn it into action. Don't just let it stew.
Exactly. That's definitely where we are in this fight. We made some headway by it actually being assigned to a Senate committee. There's only 10 days left in the session, so hopefully, it'll come up in that committee hearing, hopefully next week, because we are running out of time. It's already this is the second week of March already. The session's over on March 30th, and it's like, dang, this year's legislative session has flown by, but hopefully this won't be another year that's in vain where nothing gets accomplished. I plan on still going to the Frankfurt a couple more days here out the month to go do some lobby work, talk with as many legislators as I can to try and move this thing forward. But, this isn't an individual pursuit. As I said, this has to be something that's collective. We all have to be involved in this if we want to really see it move forward, and really, become all that it can be. We have to, contact and continue to put that pressure on these legislators, because, if we don't, they're just going to create whatever it is that they want to. And currently, as the legislation stands, what they've created is, a lack of better words, a piece of shit. To me, it's going to fail on its face. The current medical bill that's being presented, due to the fact, that there's only 5 or 6 qualifying conditions. There's no flower. There's no home grow. There is no real growth for the actual space. It's something that it's hard for me to fathom how the legislators think like this. But that's a part of it, and that's why we have to start to harass them. And I harass them by going to Frankfurt once a week, trying to talk. But what you guys can do, if you do hear this podcast, call 1-800-372-7181. That's a number where you can contact legislators to let them know that you do support medical marijuana. Specifically, even though the bill is not too much of anything, House Bill 40 or Senate Bill 47, and I believe it's House Bill 106 or 107, I believe, that's being introduced by Representative Graham. So there's a Senate medical bill, and then there's also a House medical bill, which are pretty much the same thing, but they're just introducing it on both sides of the House. So please, people, call as many times as you can, as many, harass them. That's all I got to say, because it's getting to the point where it's past time. We have to do this now, because the longer we wait, the longer patients like myself, or patients, who are cancer survivors, or who have, lupus or multiple sclerosis, who have anxiety, we're going to be, left in the wind, just there, waiting for this marketplace to open up. And that's something else that we have to be mindful of, is once if the legislation does pass this session before March 30th, there still is an implementation phase, which usually takes anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years, in terms of officially opening up the marketplace. So that's why it's of the utmost that if you want to enter the cannabis space, that you have to be proactive right now, as of today. Because if they do legalize this session, then we're about 2 years out, from the marketplace being open. So this isn't the time to sit back. You have to, sit up, take steps to, position yourself in a space where, you can provide for individuals and then also provide for yourself.
Absolutely love that you dropped the legislative hotline. I was going to do that at the end of this episode since we were talking about activation so much, but you just did it for me. And before I let you go, do you want to talk about some of the ways that maybe people can get involved either with Minorities for Medical Marijuana, Kentucky Hemp Association, where they can find that, as well as your realty group?
Sure. Everything's online nowadays. So if you wanted to go to minorities or m4mmunited.org, you can find out all the information with M4MM, including joining our organization. We do have a tiered system of membership. That starts off being a free member. And then, of course, that tier does increase and does add a price associated with it in terms of the benefits that you will have access to in the cannabis space. So that is m4mmunited.org. And then also for the Kentucky Hemp Association, you can become registered as a member in the Kentucky Hemp Association by visiting the website. Right now, currently, as it stands, there are about 90 individuals and businesses who are associated with the Kentucky Hemp Association, which is a statewide hemp trade organization. And that website is kyhempassociation.org. And to be a part of the Kentucky Hemp Association, I believe there's $100 fee or $100 dues that you would have to pay to get access to the actual hemp association. We're actually planning right now to have the Kentucky Hemp Association conference in the month of May, which is right around the corner, as if you can't believe it. That is going to be May, I believe it is May the 14th and 15th, I believe, is the weekend. The weekend of May 13th. That's what it is. The weekend of May 13th. We're going to have the Kentucky Hemp Association annual conference. That'll be here in the city of Louisville. By going to the website, you can get access to all of that information. And that, again, is kyhempassociation.org. And then when it comes to my real estate group, the Cannamercial Realty Group, we can be found at Cannamercial Realty.com, and that is spelled CANNAMERICAL Realty, REALTY.com. So that's going to give you all the ins and outs of cannabis real estate. So I've done hours and hours of research to see what exactly is needed to enter the cannabis supply chain when it comes to real estate. So by visiting my website, you'll be able to access all of that information. And then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. All my information is provided on the website. Again, that's CANNAMERICAL REALTY.com, and that's CannamercialRealty.com. So the Cannamercial Realty Group, that is my pride and joy right now, in terms of me, establishing and positioning myself in the cannabis marketplace here in Kentucky. I want to help individuals curate their cannabis properties, starting now and into the future. That's going to, position you and your business in a place that's going to allow you to be and achieve success in the cannabis market. So that's kind of, in essence, where I stand. I have another startup that I'm working for. We're kind of still in the beginning stages of that, starting to get the developer up and running. We already have other key pieces in place, and this is for a software system. It's an ERP software system, which is enterprise resource planning. So we're developing a cannabis software solution that's going to allow any size business from the small scale all the way up to the multi-state operator to efficiently run and streamline their entire business model by using a software system that's going to allow you to really determine and really see real time based off of the data that's generated, the real live time profits and your actual margins associated with your business. Now, that's another void that's currently in the space is a lot of cannabis businesses aren't able to determine what their profitabilities are, and they are basing everything off of Excel spreadsheets. Even at this stage of the game, they're still operating off of spreadsheets where there's a lot of estimates and guesstimations around their business. And, you can effectively and efficiently run a business, based off of an assumption. So that's kind of where I am in the cannabis space, filling voids. That's kind of what I see in the possibilities where the real ways of being a success and actually prospering in the space is, sitting down, thinking about it and seeing where you can insert yourself, in this multi-state or this multi-billion-dollar industry. Kentucky, I love Kentucky. I've lived here a majority of my life, even though my father was in the military. I've traveled my whole life and I've had a passport my whole life, but I've called Kentucky home, at 3 different periods of my life, and both of my boys were born here. So, Kentucky is home to me. So any way that I can be of assistance to people, feel free to reach me, social media as well, Cannamercial Realty Group on Facebook, Cannamercial Realty on Instagram, or you can find me CJ Carter on Facebook as well. It's my personal page where you can kind of see my story, see how things have played out for me in terms of being, a cannabis patient, advocate, as well as an entrepreneur. So, Elijah, man, I really appreciate you reaching out to me, man. I would definitely love to do this again as we continue to progress with this legislation. I know you're very familiar with what's going on in Frankfurt as well as I. And I definitely think that we can collaborate on some things to try and get this message even out to more people. To make everybody aware of what's going on here in Frankfurt, in between those legislative walls, because a lot of people don't know or have no idea what's going on. But I definitely appreciate you reaching out to me and extending me the offer to actually be on the Bluegrass podcast. And
well, thank you so much for coming on, CJ. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to get to meet in person. I was hoping to today, but like we said, we didn't get the chance. But
yeah, for sure. Today would have been an epic day. We would have had the hearing, then we would have sat down in person and did this podcast. Man, that would have been ideal, and I was so much looking forward to it. I was like, Tuesday is gonna be awesome. I can't wait for Tuesday to get here. And then I got that news this morning. I was like, ain't that about are you serious? But and I'm sure we'll be able to link up and meet in person. And I'm predicting that it'll be before March 30th, before this session ends, because got my fingers, toes, my arms, my hairs, everything's crossed that these guys are gonna step up and align with the majority of Kentuckians to legalize the cannabis plant.
Absolutely. And before I let you go, was there anything that you wanted to get out to listeners or any information you wanted to send out?
Okay, yes, we are actually in the process with Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We have a national program called Safe Access. I'm currently in the process of getting everything in order to have a safe access seminar for people who are interested in getting into the legal medical marketplace, because right now there are a lot of individuals who are being taken advantage of. In terms of them not knowing, what's necessary to actually enter the cannabis space. So please be on the lookout for that safe access program that we're going to be introducing. And you can find more information on Instagram at M4MMKY. That's Minorities for Medical Marijuana Kentucky on Instagram. Again, that's M4MMKY, the Safe Access Program, where we're going to offer safe access to the medical marijuana market here in Kentucky.
CJ, thank you so much for coming on.
I really appreciate you, Elijah. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Our song this week was Grow by Graham Good and the Painters. If you're a bluegrass country or singer-songwriter, send in your submissions. We feature one song per episode and would love to play yours. Also, did you know that our store is up and available? Grab a set of our new Bluegrass Banjo stickers, die-cut and made of long-lasting vinyl, so that you can help put the grass back in the bluegrass. Available on bluegrasscannabis.com. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we are at bluegrass_cannabis on Instagram, at Bluegrass Hemp on Facebook, at Bluegrass Cannabis on TikTok, and at Bluegrass Canna on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe and never miss an episode wherever you listen to podcasts. We're available on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and more. Thank you so much for listening and stopping by the Bluegrass Podcast. Old-fashioned, all-natural, Kentucky Bluegrass.